welcome today to our new episode of Smart Freight Conversations. Today I'm here with Roel Vissers, Chief Commercial Officer from Milence. And we talk here a lot about road freight decarbonization and conversion of diesel fleets to electric truck fleets, and Milence is actually a key actor in that. So Roel, tell us a little bit about what Milence does, what Milence is, and what is the purpose and mission of Milence.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here. Always very engaging and fun to be part of those conversations. So Milence is a joint venture established 3.5 years ago by Volvo Group, TRATON, and Daimler. And we are a charge point operator dedicated for building a European charging infrastructure network for heavy-duty trucks. So being established 3.5 years ago, which is actually quite a unique event in history. Well, I don't want to make it bigger than it is, but is that actually 3 fierce competitors, and in the end they represent 5 brands, because obviously TRATON is Scania and MAN, and Volvo Group is both Volvo Truck and Renault Truck. So in the end, 5 brands. They are the fiercest competitors in daily life, but they joined together to establish Milence to actually break the chicken and egg situation on how do we accelerate the deployment of electric heavy-duty trucks in Europe. And one of the tools to do so is actually to build this joint company which starts building the dedicated heavy-duty charging network in Europe.
Yeah,
and that's what we have started to do so 3.5 years ago. And I think we can already see the impact of that we have now last week opened our 30th hub. That indeed, I think the hypothesis of 3.5 years ago is working. So we are breaking the chicken and egg situation. There's still many challenges to go.
But we'll get to the challenges.
We get to the challenges.
And but maybe you can give a little bit of a sense of where you are on that. I mean, I very much recommend to go onto the Milence website, because here you can see the European TEN-T network and how the Milence hubs are actually, moving up and down the TEN-T network. So maybe you can give a little bit of a background. How many hubs are there? So what are you planning? What are you covering in terms of geography?
Yeah, sure. So we have been established with the goal in the end, build a charging infrastructure network in the EU 27+3. Right? So it's really the intent to build a full European charging network, which is predominantly built to support the long-haul electric truck journeys. But obviously, right, as a new company, we've decided to cut that into phases. So today we're still in phase 1, is that we focus to build an infrastructure in Western Europe, I would say. So last week we opened our 30th hub, and we have now hubs operational in Sweden, next month also in Denmark, UK, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, France, Spain, and Italy. Mm-hmm. While also, likely by the end of this year, we also open our first sites in Poland. So that's I think that's everything. I would say Poland and West is for us today is phase 1, and we intend to build that European network of infrastructure.
Yeah. I mean, the European Commission has put a lot of ambition into that. Yeah. So there's ambitious regulations. Some people say it's very ambitious. Yeah. So which basically assumes that by 2030, so if you convert the fuel efficiency goals that the OEMs, your shareholders, have, they basically say by 2030 you need to sell roughly 35% of new truck sales should be electric. Today we have about a tenth of that. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So that's a pretty significant ramp up. Yeah. And there's folks that actually say, it's the reason why it's lagging behind is because the charging infrastructure rollout is lagging behind. So would you agree with that statement?
Oh, the truth is always in the middle, but looking into my view on that is that what I learned in the last 3.5 years is actually that the logistic industry or the transport industry is much more complex than I thought when I started the Milence journey 3.5 years ago. As there's many stakeholders in that system which all need to adapt to that new reality of electric transportation. So my view on why we are today at only 3% is actually a very mixed bag of reasons. But also one of the reasons is that actually if you look at the portfolio of electric trucks available, which fleets can buy in big numbers today, that product portfolio is not that mature also yet. Mm-hmm. Right? So, and one of the things I learned about transport is actually that, obviously a truck is a truck, but the amount of variants of one single truck which serves a certain use cases is that the depth of the product portfolio of the electric trucks still doesn't cover use cases for, it still doesn't cover this doesn't present a solution for many use cases. Yeah. And looking into the I think all kinds of public announcements from truck manufacturers, how many different variants will be on the markets also as electric truck market models in this year and the next year, is that we will cover so many more use cases, which also means that many other fleets can also take their first steps into electrification. Mm-hmm. But I think it's definitely it's truck availability, it's charging infrastructure, not only public charging infrastructure but also depot charging infrastructure, which is not always easy. And in the end, the truck industry, the transport industry is a super competitive, cost competitive industry. Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, in the end, also the economics should work.
Yeah, indeed. So I think as my president, we're engaging with a lot of shippers and carriers on that, and trucks are basically procured or bought or leased based on economics. Yeah, so it's all about economics. It's not about taste. It's about economics. The economics work. I mean, you mentioned use cases. Yeah, so there are different use cases. We typically say there's use cases which are captive fleets. Yeah, so some shippers have basically captive fleets. They are connected to their production scheme, pretty predictable, etc. Those are relatively easy, don't roam around, so they get a lot of miles, but they in a periphery. Then it goes into clusters or back to garage models. So that's also where depot charging plays a huge role. And then the third, it's also more complex, is to go public charging to corridors. People say that public charging is a lot more expensive than depot charging. So I'm not sure if that's intuitive to everybody. Yeah. So why would that be the case? And how do you see the mix of charging happening in different use cases?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a statement which is out there. I think strongly driven by the passenger car markets, because obviously, I think the charging as a passenger car on the highways, that's clearly much more expensive than I think charging at your home charger. There are some similarities with trucks, but also clearly some differences. So if you just simply look at the cost of charging, then in the end, whether it's depot or public, you need to buy the same electrons, which need to move through the same grid, which both need a charging hardware and some civil works to make that all happen, and both need software to actually, in the end, make the invoicing happen and make sure that the charging event happens successfully. Yeah. So, looking from that perspective, the cost should be very similar. I think there's a few differences, and one of the differences is predominantly when you have big solar roofs or behind the meter renewable energy generation, is that on the renewable energy you generate behind the meter, you don't pay grid cost.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So the
energy costs less, yeah. So they produce.
Exactly, right. So then you don't pay the grid part. However, most of the depot chargers only serve one charging cycle per day. because that's predominantly during the night. You leave the truck, you charge, the next morning it's full. I think the business game, the business of a public charging CPO is to have as much energy throughput in one charger. And that can actually, because you use the charger much more often than only once per day, that can actually offset potential cost benefits or disadvantages versus depot charging. So I think summarizing, I think we in 5 or 10 years from now, when we see strong utilization of public charging hubs, I think the price of public charging versus the price of depot charging will be very close.
It may even reverse, So
and might even be
you get more utilization out of it. If it's similar infrastructure, you get higher utilization, more cycles. Well, it will be interesting. So today, indeed, I mean, the narrative is out there. Another narrative which is out there is that that also limits the ramp up. That sooner or later, especially for the megawatt chargers, you're hitting grid constraints. And I think Holland has actually a great uptake of electric trucks recently, but I think I'm hearing there's also a lot of grid constraints. So how do you see that? Is that there's to stay? And we also hear that permitting, then removing those grid constraints is also difficult. So how do you handle all of that?
Yeah, but I think grid definitely is a challenge, and it is definitely one of the biggest challenges. So when we look at looking at the grid challenges, I often get the question, how come you have already been able to build 30 public charging hubs with very decent grid connections? Well, there's a benefit being a public charging operator, because we're looking for those places along the highways where there is grid available. And when looking into depot charging, I often tell transport companies, you might have good luck or bad luck because your grandfather established your transport company accidentally on a location which is close to a grid, or which is where grid is available. But you can also have bad luck that you are accidentally on a location where grid is either not available or super expensive. So definitely it has an impact on how quick this transition goes. So if there would be zero grid constraints in Europe, the transition definitely would go quicker. And would also definitely, well, one of the reasons it would go quicker is because then it would also become more affordable and easy and quicker. But so this is definitely a concern, that also upgrading the electricity grids is also not that easy. The good news is that now, since a few years, billions and billions of euros are invested into grid upgrades. But as you mentioned, many of them the grid upgrades themselves face severe permitting issues and delays because of, well, all kinds of legal procedures
there's legal procedures. I think we've all seen it, that because there's a lot of public consent, so major grid renewal or grid expansion projects are delayed. So that's unfortunately the case. So it will be a lot of an optimization game also. So where do I place my infrastructure? Would you also build microgrids to build your own renewable energy sources?
Definitely. So. And this might be a dangerous statement, by the way, but the grid congestion is still, for a certain part, and I don't know how big or how small, but it's still also a paper congestion, right? So it's not per se that the copper line is always congested. It's also a virtual created congestion, because either we don't fully measure the grid, or we don't have the right fit for purpose contracts with, in this case, companies or consumers, on which right do they have to use the grid by when. So actually there's still a lot of optimization possible in the current grid, even in the Netherlands where it is highly congested. And one of those solutions is to create those microgrids, and whether it's your own microgrid behind the meter, so connecting directly to wind or solar generation, adding significant battery storage behind the meter, but also to create actually a microgrid with the whole logistic or industrial area.
Yeah.
That's a trend which you now see also happening more and more in the Netherlands, that we actually, with one company or with a group of companies, make much more efficient use of exactly the same copper.
Yeah. No, I think what's important to realize, I mean, as a charge point operator, you're really on the interface, between the transport system and the power system. So I think there's probably a lot of optimization possible on the electricity system, how to use the resources, how to add resources, etc. So I think that's key. So I think probably Milence as a company of size is well placed in order to play on both sides. So I mean we work a lot with the shippers. I mean, and one of the reasons why they as demand actors move into that is that they have Scope 3 obligations and commitments, but that also means that they would rather see the power, electricity from clean energy sources. And we've seen that that in certain grids which are not yet advanced, so they say, well, let's not go there. So because then we can still rather use biofuel, have a higher basic emission benefit.
Yeah.
So are you interacting? Are you doing PPAs, or do you do open access, or how do you do work with renewable producers?
I think both what you mentioned. So I think at first we with the energy contracts we have with our energy suppliers, we only procure renewable energy. Obviously, well, that's the technicalities of then procuring energy, right? But which means that obviously we get 24/7 electricity from the grid, but it's fully certified in renewable. That's a basis, right? That's a hygiene. But then on top of that, we try to also link directly with renewable energy sources when possible. So we have at the moment multiple projects ongoing where we are, hopefully we can actually see the first projects realized and built this year, where we are directly linking to large solar parks, directly linking to one windmill or multiple windmills, where we are directly linking to very large-scale battery systems. You have a direct copper line, so then you can really pinpoint that the energy from that windmill or that solar farm has been used to charge your truck. That's not on every location an option. And I think this is quite a important topic, is that if we really want to get that acceleration at the shippers, we need to solve this kind of certification issue.
Indeed. So we have actually, small side stuff. We have a project ongoing. Interesting enough, if you go into the greenhouse gas protocol, it's actually currently allowing. So they basically tell you that you can only, in the emission accounting and emission reduction, you can only account for the grid mix, and not yet, even if you have can you contractually show a PPA that's saying, okay, you don't get from the grid, but we add green energy to the grid with the PPA. So this is not yet anticipated, which is a clear hole, so it's a gap, So we are actually working with quite a number of shippers. And I mean, our colleagues work with the greenhouse gas protocol and the technical working groups to plug that gap in order to take up the electric truck deployment. So talking about shippers, so I think we have an opportunity to work together, and so we have been doing that for some time now. And obviously a key, I mean, while we see this big goals for ramp up, I mean, today it's still early stage in a way, So it's not like you go on the highway and it's all there. So in 2030, every third truck should be electric. I mean, today it's far away from that, So what keeps? I mean, we talked about this a little bit, but maybe you have some anecdotes or some short-term experiences. Why is it so difficult still, to get people to engage on the journey?
It's, I think, to be honest, you see, I really see the last 6-9 months a strong increase in willingness and engagement from many market parties, right? So that definitely makes us happy and to see that it's the transition is carried by a broader group of companies and parties. I think we really should not underestimate the timeline of those projects. So also the timeline of a building a depot hub can be quite lengthy, especially when you face challenges with grid. The timeline of building a public charging hub like Milence, well, we try to make it as soon as possible, but also can be easily 12, 15, 18 months. Obviously the system needs to work from transport company to bring goods from A to B, and preferably also close to TCO break even or positive. Ordering your electric truck is has some OEMs have been more successful in scaling production than others. I think now we have seen the first what we call generation 2 electric trucks, long haul electric trucks out there. You immediately see the difference in range and capabilities. I don't have any, in that sense, not any reliable data, but based on, let's say, LinkedIn reviews, also the reliability of those trucks and how you can operate them. Altogether, maturing in this transition, we will bring many more stakeholders on board. But I think what you asked for anecdotes. I think what is great to see is that I have not done any hard data analysis here, but as far as I'm aware, we as Milence have never lost a customer yet, right? So once a customer with an electric truck tries a Milence hub, and I cannot speak for competition, but I think there's this fear for public charging. Will it work and will there be queuing or not? But so we've never received a complaint from a customer and kind of who stated, I will not return. But we even see that we have data to see that there's a new transport company who is a new customer to Milence. You can see in the data that they start with one truck. 3 months later, suddenly they have 2 trucks. 3 months later, again, they also use a second Milence hub. So you see that once they start to get confident in the system, that there is definitely willingness to expand. So this is unfortunately the small snowball which starts small, and that snowball needs to be very big in 2030. So.
Well, I think I like the snowball you say flywheel. The snowball obviously suggests it's not a linear process, so it hopefully is actually an exponential process. I mean, in the corporate planning, you distrust hockey sticks, so especially if they're in the future. But here, I think the economic or the industrial logic is, and we see this. I mean, shippers and fleets start small, so they first want to get kind of comfortable with the product, and then also the drivers need to be comfortable with the product, and everybody, and say, range anxiety, can it work, etc. And then, positive narratives, positive stories, and then indeed, more drivers, next hub, more GR, etc. And we're confident on that as well. And I think we have a great opportunity to bring more and more actually parties. I mean, we think we have 220 members. So there's like 30 to 40 which actually feel comfortable, have resources, have experience, that can move beyond trials to scale up. There's others that are still on the fence and feel at the trial. So indeed.
But maybe also because they operate in markets which don't have the set of the framework ready yet or maybe operate in sub-segments or in certain use cases where that specific electric truck they need is not available yet or not. So I think it's definitely not always the willingness of companies and shippers, right? So I think that's the...
No, and it's not uniform across the European Union. I mean, we're here in Holland, so I think around ports, etc., is actually a good area, or there's dense networks, it's a good area. if you are in a lot of rural areas with low transport intensity, less so. Yeah, so we'll eventually get there. So just to conclude on our conversation, so if you had like some wishes, like 3 wishes, yeah, so what would that be?
3, that's a lot. The 3 wishes. I think looking at this transition, I think you mentioned it already earlier. We are really still in the very early stages of this transition, and if you want to make this transition happen, you need obviously the economics need to work. Actually, also there, I'm in that sense quite positive that both from a European Commission, there's quite some incentives or some initiatives being raised, and I'm very confident being implemented this year, which will definitely be a push. Looking at the TCO developments, also there, Milence, we launched a white paper a few weeks ago. There's different perspectives on TCO. There's many different use cases, but I think the general consensus is that by 27, 28, the TCO positive case is really there. And for some markets already today. However, so the economics need to work. And I don't have a wish because actually that is actually quite well underway, I would say. However, we need to acknowledge the risk for companies to take this transition. And I think I see two big risks. I think one risk is the risk of the residual value of trucks, of electric trucks, where I think in this TCO calculation, whether the residual value of the electric truck is whatever 10% or 20% or 30% of the original purchase price, that has a tremendous impact on the TCO. I don't think it's it's not very fair to put that residual value risk fully at the transport companies. I think that is also or leasing companies or whoever owns that truck. I think we can. There's a role to play probably for a European government to or any other actor. But I think if we can take that residual value risk away in a certain system design, that would definitely help. That's one. The same residual value or the same market risk we actually have as CPOs. So I think there's a general consensus that in 2 or 4 or 5 years' time, I'm not so concerned whether our charging hubs will be very empty. So we have built on the main 10T corridors. We have a high quality charging hub design, high quality charging activities. So in 2, 4, 5 years' time, they will be busy. However, today it's much more a binary case that it's almost we are very data driven, but it's almost by luck that you need a transport company who has that entrepreneurial spirit and who has, that's the corridor I have electrified with 8 trucks. And suddenly, and that defines a good hub from a bad hub. But that's I think we try to do our best, but there is a luck element in that. And we, mine is, I think, I make a joke, it's a very expensive hobby. And at one point in time, we have received a lot of investment from our shareholders, but at one point in time, also the capital markets need to start to support Milence. And the capital markets today are not so ready yet to support Milence because that utilization is not there. So this is a new chicken egg situation. I think the European Union also to accelerate hub developments might want to also support market risk in that as well. Third is timelines on permitting and grid connections. So today in some markets, there's simply the process. So that's not digging cables. The process can take up to a year. If we need to build X many hundred or even 1,000 plus hubs before 2030, that doesn't work.
You would think like an e-government type of approach where tuck, so because it's it's not so complicated. I mean, yes, there are probably local constraints to be taken into account and people to be asked, etc. But it should be a much more a much more established process that takes long. So no, there's a lot of important topics, and in a way, it's kind of like for startups, it's a valley of death situation, not a valley of pain. Let's put it this way, where I mean you're building charging hubs here, but the most interesting part is maybe going elsewhere, which at some stage, I mean, it will all converge, but that may take a little while. So thank you very much for your time. So I think super interesting. Good luck. I think we are confident together, that this will be work, but I think over the next couple of years, there's still a few hurdles and barriers to handle. Thank you very much.
Thank you.